All right. I think we're ready to go. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, Ms. Paula.
Happy Friday.
Hello, hello.
Happy Thursday. We
Happy
still have one more
Thursday.
day. Welcome, and I'm glad you all are joining us for this masterclass as we continue to learn and grow. I'm also streaming this on Facebook, so hello, Facebook family. Again, it's all about the knowledge, and again, I'm sensitive to everyone's time. I want to stay on point in this master class because we have a lot of information to cover today. So again, welcome and thank you all for joining us and participating in this master class. As always, I like to go ahead and do housekeeping. Hold on one second. So that those of you that are new, we have a whole lot of people that have joined and registered for this class today that's maybe outside of the GPI community. So welcome to the new participants. And we are start out again with some housekeeping. I'm always about collaboration. And it's important for me that we know who we have within our community. So if you can, please make sure you put your name, business name and location, email and contact information, your areas of expertise in the chat feature, as well as making sure if you haven't completed your business profile on the GPI Win website, please do so. Because again, it's all about us learning and understanding collectively how we can partner and go after larger contracts. Again, this is the information we're looking for in the chat box. If you have not registered for the masterclass tomorrow, you all are getting two for the price of one this week. Please make sure you join us tomorrow at noon with Attorney Chandler. She's going to drop the dime on contracts that what she's looking at up in Washington, D.C. The reason I like Attorney Chandler, she's always has her hands on the pulse. So she's going to be able to help you understand what she's hearing on the ground up in Washington, D.C. That's from noon to 1 p.m. Please go ahead and make sure you register. Also, we have the information session on Saturday. Again, for those of you who aren't aware of GPI and our program, please join us on Saturday morning, 9:30 a.m. Eastern time to get more information on how you can become a part of this community. And lastly, the first cohort for the year is going to be kicked off with our trainer today, our master trainer today. I'm so excited. This every class is limited. We cap at 25. We currently have only 12 seats remaining. So again, if you're interested in getting into this game and kicking off your year and understanding how you can market to the federal government, this is the program for you to participate in. Also, I've purchased a book. I've published a book. Please, you can go to Amazon or store.bookbaby.com. The name of the book is That's Crazy, Recognize Crazy and Run. Also, make sure you follow us on our social media channel. Megan or Shaylin, you all are going to put the link in the chat feature. We're trying to gain traction and make sure everyone knows about the GPI community. Because my overall goal is to have the government to come to us because they now know they have a community of small businesses that are speaking their language. And today's session, we're going to delve into the part 2 Ms. Thurman joined us back in October and gave us some insight on her role and what she did as the Deputy Director at SBA of the Office of Government Contracting. So I asked her to come back because I wanted her to delve in a little bit more into that office and to help you all to understand how to leverage, not necessarily leverage, but begin a relationship with that office as well. So with that being said, Joyce, I'm going to go ahead and jump into our class today. For those of you who are new and just participating, can you just again begin with a little background of who you are and your experience at SBA and just share a little bit?
Okay, well, thank you, Paula. Thank you again for the invite. And well, I began my federal government career with the Department of the Navy in South Carolina. But throughout my years of service, I've held a lot of different positions in procurement. And I've recently retired, as you said, as the Deputy Area Director for the SBA Office of Government Contracting, Area 3. And Area 3 covers the 8 southeastern states. There are 6 area offices across the country. And in my role as the Deputy Area Director, I was responsible for providing guidance and directions to procurement center representatives, commercial marketing representatives, certificate of competency specialists, as well as size specialists. And we provided, at that time, I was providing contracting and technical assistance to various businesses. And I say various businesses because that included large and small business. It also included the federal and local agencies, our local governments. I've also worked as a business opportunity specialist within SBA in the Georgia district office. I really started off as the regional business opportunity specialist, covering those 8 states again, and working with the supervisory opportunity specialists in those different states. And I worked in the district office also processing loan, and that was my idea. I got a smart idea one day that I'm providing technical assistance to small businesses, and a lot of my firms were asking me questions about loans and finances, and I would always have to go to the loan department. So I thought, oh, well, maybe I'll just go over, and I talked to the district director, and he's like, sure, we would love to have you. That was not a smart idea for me. It worked well for my companies, but it didn't work that well for me, because at that point, now I am a business opportunity specialist. And oh yes, I was also the contracting officer for the state of Georgia and a loan officer for the district office. I did it, and everything was beginning to cross over each other. I was in the loan department. I got called from the 8A department, and it was just too much. So I said, listen, I'm getting 1 check. I'm going back to doing 2 jobs for 1 check.
Yes.
I loved it though, but it did give me the understanding that I wanted. I had such a passion for providing help to small businesses, and I felt that they needed the guidance, and I wanted to be able to answer the question. I wanted to feel comfortable that the answers that I was getting from the loan department was a correct answer.
So yes, you touched all aspects of SBA throughout your career. And again, thank you for your 40 years of service at SBA and working and helping small businesses. I wanted to cover specific topics today, where I think, in my experience working at SBA, and even been on the other side as a government contractor, understanding a lot of times when we get in relationships with other business or do things that are just business to business, it's normal business to business relationships or agreements. But in this space, in government contracting, I realized working at SBA, affiliation tends to play in a lot of circumstances. And businesses tend to get in trouble and not even know that they're in trouble by these relationships and affiliation. So can you delve into what affiliation means and how your office actually gets involved, if at all, as it relates to affiliations and businesses?
Of course. First of all, as a small business, you're self-certified, correct? And you know, we get all these calls. The agency gets a lot of calls on, am I small? Well, the first thing you have to know that yes, you self-certified. You will self-certify your business as a small business by two criteria. The size of a business is determined by the number of employees. That's one way, or average receipts. That's another way. And I've always been amazed that, you know, you look at companies, we get protests that comes in from companies and they'll say, well, this is a large business. No, you still have to look at the average receipt or the number of employees. So you look at, but we also run into situations where businesses don't even realize that they are being considered large because they are affiliated with a large business, right? So what's affiliation? So when you start talking in terms of affiliation, then we start looking at, is there another business that has the ability to have the power to control your company? So those are some of the things that we're going to look at. The agency will look at common ownership. They're going to look at and control. Control is a big factor. Common management, the identity of interest, and that plays a big role because a lot of businesses are affiliated through family connection. Right.
So what does those look like when you say control and the affiliation with family members? Can you provide some examples of what that exactly looks like?
Well, we have family members, like the identity of interest, right? Family members that they're investing their monies in if you have a husband and a wife and a child, an adult child, and they're in this business. And remember, when you were in with the government, all of the programs, the one thing that they have in common is to be able to own 51%, own and control by that individual who are claiming to be small or who are claiming to be disadvantaged. Now, the agencies or the rules are not telling you that you cannot be affiliated. It's just saying that you have to maintain the control of the affiliation, right? As long as you can show through paperwork. And this is one of the things that small business get in trouble because they don't have the paper trail to prove that they are actually in control. Everything when it relates to the government is kind of boiled down to show it. I'm from Missouri, the show me state. You have to prove that you are in control. The proof is going to be in the pudding. It's going to be in the paperwork that's required when you're submitted. Now, remember what I said, you're a small business unless you are protested. You self-certified. So SBA first of all, the agencies, they don't have the legal authority to protest your size. SBA is the only agency that has the authority to do a formal determination on your size. So how do SBA find out if you're large or small or if you're affiliated? Your other small business who are your competitors is the best way to say it. Mm-hmm. They're watching everything that you're doing. Either you work with them or you work against them. Mm-hmm. But all the information is there. So a lot of times companies, when they're marketing their business, they're putting all of this information. We have over $300 million in sales. Well, if I am on a contract with you and this is a small business set aside, and I'm looking at your website and it says $300 million sales, there's nothing wrong with that. Please don't get it twisted. There's nothing wrong. That's a good thing. Making money is a good thing. And if that's the case, that's a good thing. Because again, remember size is determined by the number of employees or average receipt. If you happen to be in manufacturing If you're making $300 million a year, that's fine as long as your number of employees meet that NAICS code. And if the NAICS code says, in order for you to be small, your number of employees have to be under 500 or 1,500 or 2,500, then you can make as much money as you possibly can. So yes, that's fine. So I'm not saying you can't put this information on the web. You want to market your business. You want the world to know that you're successful, that you're doing well. I'm just saying be able to back it up, because if you're protested, and that's when the determination of your size is going to come into play, then if you're protest, and there's a way that it has to be protested. No, just any company cannot come in and protest you. It has to be on a procurement. And the company who's protesting you has to be an interested party. They have to be one of those firms who had bid on that contract. So I guess what the government is saying is, hey, if you're a large business and you're bidding on small business procurement, you're knocking other small businesses out of a job. So this is our way of, the government's way of ensuring that small businesses are getting their fair share of the procurement dollars by saying, hey, we have an office that has oversight. Because remember, SBA is an oversight agency. So there's an agency that has his eyes on you. And again, the contracting officers, they don't have the authority to decide a size protest. They don't have the authority to ignore a size protest. They don't even have the authority to advise a protester. They can only obtain the information and forward it on to the SBA, and SBA will make a formal determination. Now, if you are protested and you decide, I don't want to be bothered with the paperwork, guess what's going to happen? SBA is going to determine you large because you did not provide the information.
And what's the consequences?
Now you have to compete with the large boys and not the small.
So there's nothing monetary or anything if you're considered a large business, although you're acting as a small, or the
what the agency is going to tell you is, based on the information that we have received or not received, we've found your company to be other than small. You can no longer go after small business set aside. Now, consequences come into play if you continue to do that after you have been warned. Because remember, up until this point, you have the right to self-certify. So once you are formally determined to be other than small, and you deliberately go after small business set aside, it's going to be it becomes fraud, and it becomes a legal matter.
And for me, I've always, when I played on the other side as a government contractor, I've always been hesitant in thinking of a protest, because I was always trained on the other side that protest is not good, because sometimes you might get blackballed, even though they may or may not blackball. No one's going to say that. Is there anything against, because sometimes people just protest because they're mad that they lost that bid.
That's true. And honestly, in this world of the size, you will see the same companies protesting over and over again. So keep in mind now, when you're talking about size, you're not talking about your capabilities. You're talking about, and you have to make that decision as a small business owner. Now, if this is a lot different, if you are protesting a contracting officer because you come to the SBA and you say, hey, I feel like this contracting officer is doing some shenanigans or something, and I want to protest, or I feel like this should be a small business set aside in this protest, and this company and this contracting officer is going full and open. That's different. And so, yes, those particular companies feel like if I say something, then maybe I'll be blackballed. But on the size side of the house, you're not going to be blackballed, because remember, the resources are limited. This is a rule. contracting officers, they don't know if you're large or not because you certified that you're small. They're going to go by the information that you provide. And there are some cases where even the contracting officer will send because a government agency can ask SBA, can you make a determination because it looks like this company is large.
Mm,
Now that agency can do that,
mm,
and they can ask for a formal determination to be made by the SBA.
mm.
That happens. Now, what you're talking about as far as being blackballed, that's real too. That's a whole nother conversation.
Good, good. I mean, that's the reality. And so for me, on the other side, I was always careful because when you protest, and maybe we need to define that for those who don't know what occurs with that protest. You're stopping that agency from proceeding forward on that contract. Is that correct?
Correct.
Once a protest is issued.
Well, this is where, remember I said I provided guidance to our procurement center rep, PCRs, right? They wear a big, big hat.
Mhm,
Again, SBA is an oversight agency.
mhm,
PCRs are located at installations, DOD, civilian, GSA, NASA. They're assigned to these particular agencies. Some of them are on site, some of them happen to be in an SBA office, some of them may be on another location at a district office or somewhere. But they are assigned to all of these agencies to ensure that the mission of the agency is taken out. They are working to ensure that small businesses are getting their fair share of the procurement dollars. So they are looking at the acquisition. When I was a PCR, I remember my very first week as a PCR. The very first week, I had a $500 million project to come across my desk. This particular project had always been set aside for small business. The small business had outgrown its size. Every small business wants that dream, right? Every one of them, until they outgrow it. And then they realize, now I have to compete with the large companies. Then all of a sudden, I don't want to be considered small. Large. I want to remain small because this is a big contract. And this happened to be a big IT contract. Well, I worked with the agency. I was new. They knew I was new. I went, introduced myself, say, hey, I'm assigned to you. I have oversight. I have this procurement that I'm looking at. And you want to go full and open. So the contracting officer, she came to my office after I'd already went to her. She came to my office and said, this is all the paperwork and want you to know this is my reason why I want to go full and open. I said, okay, cool, but let me, I need some time to look at the information that you have provided. I took a look at the information. It appeared that small business had always the historical data. Historical data is very, very important. I took a look at the historical data and made a determination that no, this was still suitable for small business, even if this particular small business is now large. We disagreed. And I said, well, fine, I have no problem. And my spill was, we're not going to take this personal, but I do not agree with you. This is a $500 million contract. Small businesses can still perform the work. What I did was I used the database that's available to you guys out there. I contacted the small businesses, provided the statement of work saying, hey, I'm getting ready to enter into the ring. I got my gloves on. I don't want to get knocked out. This is my first week. I'm ready for this fight. Are there any small businesses out there who can perform this work? If so, here's a statement of work. Tell me who you are. Tell me if you fall into one of the social economical categories. Tell me about the largest contract that you have. This is a $500 million contract. I don't need a startup company. I just need to know if you could perform. Whew, got overwhelmed, got all the responses that I needed. Because there's a rule of two. I was just hoping to meet the rule of two. I had about 20 good companies and I was sure that there were small businesses because I did my due diligence. So I was really comfortable that there were other small businesses out there but you can be sure and still don't get the response. If I did not get the response, then I would have had to concur with the agency. But I did get the response, fought the agency, the contracting officer disagreed, so we had to take it to the next level. So her boss had to sign off. Then her boss calls me in and said, "Do you want to work for me?" I don't think so. I think we've already started off on a bad foot, so I don't think I want to do that, not right now. So no, I don't want to work for you. I just want to make sure that small businesses are getting their fair share of the procurement dollars. And I need for you to take a look at this information that I've provided. And mind you, as a PCR, I only had 2 days to respond if he had not concurred. Of course, he stuck his guns, and I expected him to stick with his contracting officer, and that was fine. Because again, I said, I'm not going to take it personal. It wasn't a personal fight. I just was wanting them to know that I wanted to go into this new agency, letting them know who I am, what I stood for, and the fight was real, and that small business, and I was going to fight for small businesses. So he disagreed with me. So once that happened, then I have to go to my boss and say, okay, this is a fight. I'm willing to fight it. I know I'm new, but I think I have enough information that we could win the fight. And the interesting thing about it is it went up to Washington. SBA is not even the one that's going to make the final decision. The final decision is going to be made by their agency. So that's why it's important that when a PCR is asking for background information, they're not just asking, they're asking to build, they're building a foundation. And so their agency concurred with me that it was still suitable. It was still a small business set aside. It was a good contract. Small businesses are still doing it. And that's why, when you talk in terms of protests, yes, at this point, every business have to make a determination. Am I willing to fight this agency?
And that becomes a challenge. Sometimes on the contracting side, I've had clients and I've experienced it myself as the government contractor, where you sort of a lot of times caught between the contracting officer and the contracting officer representative who's managing the project. And how did that office play into it, helping small businesses? Let's say I have a contracting officer wants me to hire somebody that's a friend of them.
Right.
And I'm left, okay, do I go ahead and hire this friend of this agency? Or do I go back to the contract? You're caught in between. So how do you even get around those situations?
When I was, if you're an 8A firm, you have an advocate, right? You can get your business opportunity specialist to talk directly to the agency. And so when I was in the 8A program, when I had situations, because these are real life situations, they happen. Okay, these are not jokes. These are things that actually happen. And so, and it happens on both sides, because sometimes the contracting officer would come to me and say, well, Joyce, your firm is doing this, right? Or I had a construction firm who had a funeral home. And she's like, is she a funeral director or a construction firm? And so what would happen was the CEO was able to relate to me some of the things that they felt that the company was doing that was not kosher. They couldn't say it to the company, I could. So I could go back because I was their specialist. I was in charge of helping to develop, and I could be honest, and I was always honest with my firms and say, hey, these are the issues. This is how, the government is looking at you. So it's your choice. You can't make a company do anything, but it is your choice. So I would relay the information because I became the middle man per se. And on the opposite side, if I had a small business, and even if you're not 8A, utilize your procurement center rep. That's what they're there for. They're supposed to be your small business advocate. So if you're having an issue with an agency, contact the small business you contact your PCR first, because your PCRs are going to know who are the small business professionals at that particular agency that he or she needs to be working with to help you to alleviate your problem. So you go to the PCR and you say, listen, this is a problem and I don't know how to handle it. It's sensitive. But one of the things that you don't want to do is you do not want to work outside the scope of your contract. If that is not within your contract, do not do it. Make them put it in writing. Okay. Once you do it, it's harder for you to prove to the agency that they told you to do it. Now, we all know that you're not going to go do something for nothing just because out of the goodness out of your heart. But I will advise you again, hear me and hear me clearly. Never work outside the scope of your contract. If it's not in your contract, say to the contracting officer rep, because that's who you are going to be communicating with, and not the contracting officer, the person with the authority to bind. So you see the issue here, you got one person that you're talking and working with daily who really don't have the authority. They have to go to the contracting officer. So if that contracting rep or who are contracting specialist, whoever you're talking to is asking you, hey, I need you to clean extra rooms, and that's not in your contract, you're going to have to say, I would love to do that. Are you going to modify my contract to include that? So it's about building relationship, and it's about being able to have those true conversations. So if you're having an issue with an agency, whoever signed that contract, which is going to be the contracting officer, call them up, email them and say, there's an issue that we need to talk about.
Okay. All right, that's wonderful advice. But let's look at if you are a subcontractor on a prime and you're not getting paid. Who do I contact?
There are two people that you want to contact. You want to contact the contracting officer, and you want to let that contracting officer know, because the contracting officer is going to be the person who knows if that prime actually has gotten paid. Because sometimes small businesses will hear, well, the primes will say to them, well, we haven't gotten paid yet. Well, when SBA goes back in and take a look at it and starts talking to the contracting officer, they're able to say, well, yeah, that prime has gotten paid. So SBA has, just like we have, just like SBA has, and I keep saying we, I don't represent SBA. So if I say we, it's because I've had 42 years of government and it's hard to get it out of my system.
I know.
So, but SBA have what you call commercial marketing rep. They mirror the PCR, and the difference being is that the commercial marketing rep, CMRs, work primarily with the large business, right? So they're the ones that you want to start. If you're having a problem, contact SBA, contact like I said, there's 6 area office. If you don't know who to talk with, start at the top, start with the area directors and say, area directors, this is my problem. You tell me who I need to go to. You can email them. Email is going to work better than calling this. Hey, everybody's teleworking, right? But everybody is working, so they'll get your email. And don't get frustrated if they did not respond to your first email. You keep emailing until you get a response.
Exactly. And again, I train on the outside, now that I'm on the outside, for them to also leverage relationships with their congressional representatives. That's a secret too, but how do you find that to be effective with agencies when small businesses reach out to their representatives?
Well, it's very effective. It's very effective, because guess what? No matter how busy you are, your whole world stops when you get a congressional. You have to stop. Like I said, hey, if you don't get a response, call. But if you get a congressional, I don't care if the president's in your office. You're going to have to say, excuse me, Mr. President, I got to answer this congressional. It's frustrating to a government employee.
Why is that? Why does that automatically move you up the ladder?
Well, these congressmen want to look good in the eyes of their constituents, right? They are, they're under different cabinets, they do different things. And the worst thing they want, the first thing they want is to make sure that they're keeping their constituents happy. And they are not going to ignore it, no matter how simple it is. They're not going to ignore your requests. They're going to contact the head of SBA. They're not going to just talk to some lowly area director or deputy area director. They're going to go straight to the administrator of the SBA. They say, my constituent is having this issue with your district office or your area office. Your PCR did not do this, or you need to find out what happened in this contracting issue and resolve it.
So it's very important that small business owners keep a paper trail. That's what the email is. You got to be able to provide the supporting documentation for anybody to be able to fight on your behalf. You agree?
Agree. Paperwork is very, very important. If you've had a conversation, email can be your friend. You can always send an email to the CEO saying, this is my understanding of our conversation. That paperwork becomes the foundation for whoever is looking into your case or your situation to come back and say, okay, the small business have reached out. They've done this based on the information. This is your response, or you did not respond. Because at this point, remember, we become detective at this point. We have to drop everything and figure out what's going on. And there's a time frame. Okay, so congressionals, we can't, the reason why we have to drop everything is they only give us so many days to process these things.
Wow. Wow.
And sometimes we have to go back and say, we need more time because we have to dig a little bit deeper. And maybe the person was off for a week, whatever it is. An answer has to be provided to that congressional staff.
Thank you, Joyce, because I think a lot of times we are disconnected with the Congress, the agencies, and how all of those tie in together, and how you're able to get the support that you need from various parts of the government. So that's wonderful. We're moving along. Is this good questions? Can we take one little break? Does anybody have a question that you put in the chat that we can ask before we go into the next topic? All right. If not, we're going to jump into the products and manufacturing side of it.
Wow.
My areas has always been on the service side. And I think a lot of, I think it's a catch-22, but for me, I think you have to really understand what you're getting involved in when you're purchasing or supplying products to the government. Some of the experience that I've had with some of my clients is they won a contract and let's say to provide light bulbs, and they've negotiated with a supplier of that manufacturer. And let's say it's a large contractor, and that manufacturer say, no, we want this ourselves. We're not going to supply those supplies to you. So can you provide any recommendations on how businesses, if that's where they're trying to go, begin in that process, and so that they're able to protect themselves?
Yes, if you are providing a product to the government, and here again, please read and understand the rules as it relates to providing supplies to the government. It is totally different than providing services to the government. Your example of providing light bulb, that SBA has what you call a waiver list. A waiver list simply is a list of items that is manufactured, that's not manufactured by small business, right? So there's this list, if this item, so if there are not any small businesses that procured light bulbs, then you don't have a problem, right? Because the rules are, if you are a supplier, then you must get your items, your manufacturing items from a small business, if it's a small business set aside. And the only way that you're going to bypass that rule is if that item is on the list, on the waiver list, right? So you have spun your wheel and you've marketed and you found this $50 million contract to provide the government light bulb. You go to your manufacturer, and this has happened, as Paula stated, and say, hey, I have this contract. I'm going after this contract with the government, and will you be able to provide me light bulbs? They say, yes, we can provide you light bulbs. Cool. One of the things that small businesses have to get in mind, again, everything needs to be in writing, that they are going to provide this item to you. All of a sudden, you have gone in, you have negotiated with the government that you are going to provide light bulbs for a $50 million contract. You've signed it, you're feeling really good, you're about to start production, and guess what? Your manufacturer is not delivering. What's going to happen to you as a small business owner? Because now you have signed a contract with the government saying that you, because remember, read, that you are responsible, not your manufacturer, you are responsible. So now you got to go back to the government saying, oh, I can't deliver by January 31st. My supplier is saying, can I have another 30 days? Well, you run into a good contracting officer. They're like, okay, things happen. Of course, what's the problem? Yes. But you don't know as a small business owner that somebody's stabbing you in the back and trying to get that contract from under you, and they're deliberately, right, not providing the light bulbs as you had agreed on. So now you're in a fight for your life. Well, a small business fighting against a company who has internal lawyers, procurement lawyers, loophole lawyers, it's going to be a whole different fight. There are a lot of small business that provide supplies to the government that does very, very well, right? You first need to know what agencies are buying your products, right? There's an agency that's called the Defense Logistic Agency that buys a lot of products. There's machinist shops out there in Alabama that's making a killing because they're getting, what, $50,000 contracts, but you're getting 3 or 4 a day. That's a lot of money. They're family-owned business, and they have decided, I only want 3 or 4 contracts. This is your business. You make a decision which direction you want to go. When we talk in terms of biting off more than you can chew, those are the things that you're going to look at. You need to understand your industry, because to go back to the light bulb contract, right? You may not manufacture it, but you may provide the service of it. Maybe you want to think in terms of the service part of it, the installation, work with an electrician, some of the problems that you can have. You can still get a piece of that contract, and you can still get the contract as the way you originally intended. I am just saying that you need to ensure that whatever agreement that you make is in writing, and it's we always say court your partner before you marry them, because sometimes you don't know who you're marrying, and you don't want to get in bed with somebody you can't stand. That makes for an awful divorce.
I'm a witness.
Sorry. I hope this makes sense.
It does, and I had another example of a client who, let's say they were selling widgets to the government, and the government had a sense that they weren't really making those widgets, and they did a site visit to the facility. And in this example, the person who was packaging and putting her stamp on it, and that's all that she was doing, ended up getting in trouble because she had the manufacturer in there, just manufacturing it, but it wasn't her. So she ended up losing and getting in trouble because
Right.
she wasn't really producing that item as she was claiming. She was just putting a label on it and said, I did it.
Well, in anything that you do, you want to be honest,
Mhm.
right? Because even in manufacturing, maybe she would have gotten away with it if she was saying she was assembling it as a kit, you know? Maybe if she had the manufacturers deliver it as kits, and then because that kits can fall under the manufacturing, right? If you're taking parts and putting it together and coming up with a whole item, you're manufacturing it. You know, manufacturing the different parts, but you're taking the different parts and putting it together. So again, it still takes understanding the rules and the regulations. Some people, they thrive on understanding the rules because that's how they became rich.
Mhm. Mhm.
You know, if you think about the 1%ers,
Yeah.
it's not like they're living by the rules. They just learned the rules.
Exactly, exactly. And in that other scenario, has she had that manufacturer train her project director, who is now on on her payroll, she would have passed the smell test. So
Right.
you're right in understanding what you're getting involved in. And so often, I've had incidents, businesses decided they got their first contract, but before they signed it, they really didn't understand what they were getting into. So make sure before you sign anything that you have conversations with that agency so that you're clear of what you're biting into. Because if, let's say you won this contract and and it was actually you're losing money on that contract, right?
Correct.
Yeah, you've signed the contract, the government doesn't care. So how are businesses able to recoup that in that type of situation, Joyce?
Everything that we do, Paula, is about relationship.
Mhm.
When and it's no difference, right? There are I've ran into so many businesses that are afraid to ask the question.
Mhm.
They're afraid to say to a contracting officer, I don't understand this. This is a new world. When I got into procurement, it took me years to understand every aspect of procurement because it's constantly changing.
Mhm.
Even the individuals that you are talking to at some of the installations, they're new. They don't completely understand it. That's why SBA goes in and they provide training constantly every day.
Mhm.
So do not be afraid or ashamed or I don't
Mhm.
think I should ask this question. Ask the question because that could save your company or
Mhm.
save that particular contract. That if you have a question, then someone else may have the same question. And you have the right to get clarification before you sign that document. Because once you sign that document, you have bound your company and yourself. And you could very well be working a contract and losing money. And this is why I said, if you are working a contract, don't work outside the scope of that contract. If you are because that happens too. You start on a contract and you realize the government did not take this into consideration. You have the right as a small business owner and say, this is not a part of my contract. And I don't think you thought about this, but in order for this contract to be successful and for it to work, this needs to be done. So what is it that you want me to do? Do you want me to continue as is? Are you going to go back and modify the contract to include this part of the contract? So when you have small businesses that are working outside the scope of their contract, that's going to be a big problem.
Mhm. Being aware, being aware. This is wonderful, Joyce. Great information. Do you, I still wanted to add, put your questions in the chat and we'll use the next 5 or 10 minutes in responding to some of your questions. While we're getting those questions together, what recommendations, Joyce, would you provide to people who are just starting into this business and existing businesses as it relates to navigating in that space? So if I'm just starting out, what would be your recommendation in where I start to get into this space outside of coming through GPI's training program? Shameless plug. But what do you recommend small businesses do?
My first recommendation is to make sure that whatever business that you have a love and a passion for it. You go in it with the mindset that it's going to be a lot of work, but I'm going to succeed in this business because this is my passion. The next thing is to find out, well, which agencies or agency is procuring my service or need my service or my product. There in Georgia alone is over 300 top buying activities, not just 300 agencies. And their website, all this information that you need is out there, right? So who's buying my product? What historical data is out there? Do I need a partner? Do I need to learn about teaming? Can I team? How's my finances? Do I have the workforce? Again, these things are important because if you're hiring just Joe Blow off the street and they can care less about your business, that's going to create a problem for you because you signed the contract, not Joe Blow.
Yes. Because I had a contracting officer. Once I had the lawsuit filed against me, I had a contracting officer come in and started looking at my books that she didn't renew the next year. So again, I knew I was liable. We do have one question. Someone says, I'm still new to the entire system. I supply customizable apparel. How do I know what markup is feasible on products? Great question.
That is an excellent question. Again, the database is there. You can go on GSA Advantage. And that's a whole nother topic, but you can use the information. Under GSA Advantage, usually these companies are going after trying to become GSA schedule holders. Now, you may not understand what a schedule holder is, but you can go to gsa.gov, take a look at that database. Companies have their information, and all this information is public knowledge, right? Their information is there, pricing's there, what they're paying for an item. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, it's out there. The information is actually out there. And so for small businesses and those businesses who are just starting, take the time to learn the procurement side of the house. Take the time, and it's going to take some time and some money to learn government procurement. Have the conversations with companies who are in the same line of work that you're in. Call them up, invite them to lunch and say, you know what happened? Tell me your success stories, but tell me your failures too. Because the failures are the ones that really make you strong.
Absolutely. One other question was, as a new business, it's hard to get funding. I've talked with several funding institutions and they tell me the business needs a steady, positive cash flow. How are we supposed to get started? I thought my business would qualify from contracting financing, but was told no. I want to take that question, Joyce, because I'm in the same place that she's in.
Okay.
And we will always get questions at SBA. I need money to start my business. SBA does not issue money to necessarily start your business. There's no grant to start your business. So we're going to demystify that. They do provide what they call microloans or micro purchases. Maybe you can delve into that for someone that is starting out, because again, banks aren't going to loan you $200,000, $300,000. That's not feasible for them. So you want to can you discuss the micro?
Not just the micro. I think if you're having a financial issues, which is a reality for a lot of small business, I would suggest that you do contact the SBA and start having those conversations with loan officers. First, start with your bank, right? If you've gone to your bank and said, hey, I need a business loan, and they say no, try another bank. Small businesses think just because one bank tells you no, all of them will tell you no. That's not the case. Their banks are like anything else. Some banks only loan money to certain entities. So you need to kind of shop around. And then you need to learn about the loans that Paula is talking about. There are loans, whether you're a service disabled vet or a woman, or micro loans that SBA will back, right? And what SBA says to the lenders is, hey, if you loan this small business the money, then we'll guarantee, we'll guarantee it up to a certain percentage. So you need to figure out if that's the case. And if that's not the case, and you've had some, need to fix your credit, then they even have classes on how can I fix my credit. But it's not that it cannot happen. And maybe you need to start with a smaller contract that's not going to require the funding. Maybe you need to start thinking in terms of, and I know we didn't touch on micro purchases with agencies, right? There are certain agencies, well, all of the agencies have what they call micro purchases. Anything over 25,000 by law has to be advertised. But what about those $2,000, $3,000, $10,000 contracts? A micro purchase is any contract that's $10,000 or less. They're not advertised. So how are you going to get your foot in the door to hear about those particular contracts that are not advertised? The way that you're going to do it, you're going to use the database, USA Spending or FPDS, Federal Procurement Database, NG. So you're going to use this database and you're going to find out which agency procures the product or services that you provide. Then you're going to contact that agency. And if you don't know who to contact, then you contact SBA, PCR, and they'll find out for you. There you can start again with the area director, and you can say, once you got the information in hand, you can say, okay, you can introduce yourself and say, I am interested in doing business with your company, with your agency. I see that you do have, because all of the agencies are going to have contracting officers who are just, the only thing they do is micro purchases. They have perfected that's their job, right? So you want to be in contact with that person. You want to get on their radar. You want to send them your capability statement, but you got to know what a capability statement is.
Yes.
You have to have
the program. We help you produce it. We are winding down. I have one more minute. Someone asked, hi, Ms. Peavy, how you doing? If you subcontract the work out, what can you put in place to ensure that the work will be completed? And that goes back to some of those templates that's in the program where I had the subcontracting agreement and the terms and conditions. The government's not going to get involved if your subcontractor is not getting the work. So you have to be responsible and staying close to that buyer, let them know what's going on and making sure that you find somebody to get the job done, whether it's the original subcontractor you hired or someone else that can finish the product. Stuff happens. So this was absolutely wonderful, Joyce. I thank you. It is one. What do you all think? Give her some claps in the chat.
Excuse me,
feature.
Miss Paul.
Yes.
How you doing?
Yes.
This is Chris Reese. I just
Yes.
have a question for Ms. Thurman, if that's okay.
Yes.
Yes, Ms. Thurman, you mentioned about small businesses like ours applying for loans. Okay, when you apply for loans at these different banks, right, you're getting turned down. Does it work the same way as your personal business credit, where you take these bad inquiries, these hard inquiries on your report? Do you accumulate those the same?
They're going to.
Go ahead.
He's asking, are you going to get your credit going to get hit if you go to these different banks as you're looking to get loans?
When you are with the businesses, once you start your business and have everything up and running, then Dun & Bradstreet is going to keep up with your business. They're going to keep up with your finances. They're going to keep up with, I don't think it works just exactly the same as your personal, where the inquiries, because even now, even with your personal, there are ways that they can inquire without hurting you.
Right.
So don't be concerned with, go ahead.
Okay, so yeah, because that's where it gets tricky, right? You know, with credit. You start to make bad inquiry, you keep getting turned down. I was just wondering that it operate the same way, because that could also play a factor in getting a loan through.
We're going to have Rose Financial Solutions. They're going to come in and talk about during a webinar next month on access to capital, because generally within our community, and the number tells the story, banks aren't not necessarily lending in a high volume to us. So we tend to start our business with loans from family members or credit cards. I'm guilty. To try to position yourself to become bankable. But you have out there companies that are called factoring companies.
Right.
I call them check cashing stores for the business. I'm not necessarily as concerned about financing it once you win it. Somebody will finance it. It's just at what cost. But your goal is to get yourself in a position so that you are bankable.
Yes.
All right.
So yeah, I'm sorry to sidetrack you guys. She brought it up, and I just curious, right? If it works the same. That's all. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you. We're going to close. Again, tomorrow's masterclass with Attorney Chandler. Some of you participated in her bidding on steroids. I like to say she's the doctor. After people leave our program, then it goes directly into looking at these opportunities and putting opportunities together and submitting them in real time. So I'm excited about having Attorney Chandler on our team. Again, if you want to be involved in the program, you can register for the information session on Saturday. And again, Master Trainer Joyce Thurman will be kicking off our first cohort of the year. We only have 12 seats remaining, so if you're interested, make sure you go ahead and get your name in the pot. Thank you again for always supporting GPI. I hope this was helpful for you guys as you continue your journey in this path. And I look forward to seeing you tomorrow and Saturdays. I'll see you. Thank you again, Joyce.
You're welcome. Thank you.